Hi, Rhema. It's week 31, day 5 of our Bible narrative reading plan. Today we're in 2 Kings chapter 20. We're continuing and coming to the end of the life of King Hezekiah, a good king overall in the southern kingdom of Judah, a king like David, and yet we're going to see that Hezekiah still continues to have flaws like all humanity does. 2 Kings 20 seems to be a flashback of some sort. We've got to reconcile this idea of his life, Hezekiah's life being prolonged, 15 years, and how that fits in with the other details we know. So it seems like it might be best to think of this as a flashback in some way, because verse 1 says, in those days. And that very well may be the writer of Kings, his way of letting us know this is a flashback to earlier in his life. In those days, Hezekiah became sick and he was at the point of death. Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz, comes to him and gives him this announcement from the Lord. He lets him know, hey, Hezekiah, you're about to die. And Hezekiah prays. He says, Lord, remember how I have walked with you in faithfulness and with a whole heart and have done what is good in your sight. Hezekiah wept bitterly. Now, it's possible, again, this is 15 years earlier than the other things that we've read, that this lets us know that there's a heart condition for Hezekiah. His heart is not quite where it needs to be. Yes, he has walked with the Lord in many ways, and yet that is his response. He's not turning to the Lord's goodness. He's not pleading on behalf of the Lord's faithfulness. He's saying, Lord, remember how I have walked with you. The emphasis is on himself. And Isaiah is in the temple there, and the word of the Lord comes to him, and he says, go back. Say to Hezekiah, thus says the Lord, the God of David, your father, I have heard your prayer. I have seen your tears. Behold, I will heal you. So God, knowing the heart far better than we can about Hezekiah, God hears Hezekiah's prayer, and he answers it. He gives Hezekiah this additional 15 years of life. Hezekiah asks for a sign. How will I know that this physical healing is going to happen? And God tells him that it's going to be through this interesting way of marking time. It seems to be the first time in the Bible that it tells us this sort of a tool, almost like a sundial or a clock or something like that in terms of what we might think of, a way of marking time. And so he's given this sign. But then the king of Babylon, he's heard that Hezekiah is sick, and he comes and he is bringing all sorts of gifts. He sends his entourage from Babylon, and they show up with all these gifts, and Hezekiah rolls out the royal carpet. He shows them everything in the palace, everything within his control, and Isaiah hears about it. And he asks him, how much did you show them? And Hezekiah says, everything. Isaiah says, there will come a day when everything that you have shown them is taken away. There will come a day when your sons are taken away to Babylon. Perhaps Hezekiah was interested in Babylon. He was perhaps wanting their help, their assistance in the fight against Assyria. But whatever his reasoning for relating this way to the Babylonians, whether it was pride, whether he was seeking help, it is not bringing about the result that he had hoped for. Isaiah tells him that he is going to lose every bit of this, and that his sons one day will be taken captive to Babylon, but it will happen after Hezekiah's death. And what seems to again point to his heart, at least at first glance, without digging very deep, it seems like Hezekiah saying, well, that's not so bad. I will have peace and prosperity, security in my days. Perhaps he's looking for that silver lining in the cloud, but overall it seems like Hezekiah does still have some selfishness in his heart. But yet God has heard his prayer, he's answered his prayer, and he's prolonged his life. So what do we make of a man like Hezekiah, a king who overall has done good for the kingdom? He's walked in the way of David, and the writer of Kings tells us here at the end that he's done much for the infrastructure of the city, talking about the pool and the conduit and all that sort of stuff. It's all recorded in Chronicles, and we've read some of that, and Hezekiah ends in death, as do all kings. Here's a summary of today's reading. For more information, go to tunemyheart.org.